Hi guys, and welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Lula and today I'm going to be talking to you about breaking the 1000 ELO barrier. I was going through my YouTube the other day and I was looking at all of my previous videos, among which there is a video that none of you have seen before. That's because it's the first video I ever made or uploaded to my channel, and I never made it public. It was always private. And this video is just a clip compilation of me when I was 900 ELO trying to reach 1000 ELO. I just want to reach 1000. I was not very good at editing, still not that good at editing, but much better than I was though. Was also just like not confident with posting it. And I remember I was very frustrated because I had tried multiple times to reach 1000 on stream and I wasn't able to do it. There were people in my chat backseating, getting frustrated with me when I wasn't winning games, as though it was their rating on the line, and this was frustrating me even more because I really wanted to be 1000 ELO, but I wanted to earn 1000 ELO. I didn't want other people's moves to get me there. So I had a bit of a tough time reaching 1000. Obviously, at some point, I eventually did. I just felt at the time like there was something stopping me. I felt like other people at my level were just consistently outplaying me and that they knew something that I didn't know. So if you're struggling to break into a 4-figure rating, first of all, I feel you. And second of all, I believe in you, because if I can do it, anyone can do it. Anyway, this is all to say that when I was looking at this video, I noticed that there were a couple of key things that could have helped me on my journey to breaking 1000 ELO. And seeing as that time has long passed, I thought maybe those things could help you now if you are struggling to be 1000 ELO. So I have 5 things to talk about today, varying in difficulty. Number 5 is definitely the hardest, but number 1 is simple opening mistakes. At the lower level, a lot of games already have a decisive advantage or disadvantage out of the opening. And this is simply because people don't know basic opening ideas for the openings that they're playing. I'm not saying that you should learn a lot of theory, but if you're going to play the Caracan like I was at the time, yes, I was playing the Caracan, you need to know the main opening ideas in each of White's main sidelines, because at your level, White is almost certainly not playing the main line and is going to play a series of sidelines, all of which have different ideas and all of which you need to know at least a couple of moves to not die as black in those openings. In general, I don't recommend that beginners play openings like the Caracan, the French, or God forbid the Sicilian for these reasons. But if you do, then at least I can help you be slightly better equipped to deal with them. So what I mean by the key ideas is that, for example, in the French or the Caracan, you need to know about the C5 break. This is very important. Now, this is not a video about openings. I'm not here to teach you those ideas, but you should probably watch a couple of videos about the openings that you're playing. And for example, if you notice that there is a specific line that you find really tricky, like the fantasy variation in the Caracan or the 2 knights variation or something like this, you need to seek out a line to play against it so that you don't lose every game in that line, because that is a gaping hole in your knowledge and your repertoire, and it's very, very easy to fix. The number 2 thing you need to know about the openings that you play is when to castle. Now, in E4, E5 openings, usually you try to castle as soon as possible, and this is what we teach beginners. But a lot of beginners these days don't play E4, E5 like they used to in the past. And so if you're playing the Caracan or the French, for example, which are 2 very popular openings for beginners, you might die if you castle as soon as possible, especially if they've pushed E5, they've castled long, they have some kind of Greek gifting idea, and you might really, really regret it. And there are even lines in the French where you long castle, for example. So this is one of the reasons why these openings are harder for beginners, but you need to start to get a sense for when it's safe to castle and when it's unsafe to castle, because king safety is the number 1 metric by which you should be evaluating every chess position, including your own. Not just puzzles, not just how can I attack my opponent. You need to be able to look at your own position as objectively as possible and say, is my king going to be safe or not? The number 3 thing you should know about your opening is where the pieces go. Now, I'm assuming that we're not all out here playing system openings. Not every opening is the London, where you can put the pieces on the same squares every time. And if you do try to put the pieces on the same squares every time, you might find out that that is not where they go, and you might end up getting a bad position. So to be totally honest, it can be very difficult to know what the best squares are for your pieces sometimes. And so all I can really recommend is that you look at maybe some Grandmaster games in your opening, not because you're going to play like a Grandmaster. We are not as deluded as that, but so that you can see where good players decide to put the pieces in the opening variations that you're struggling with. Because if you're struggling because maybe you're always playing bishop g5 and pinning a knight to a queen, maybe the bishop just doesn't belong there, that kind of thing. So if you're putting your pieces in non-harmonious ways on the chessboard, you're kind of not setting yourself up for tactics or a good strategy, and that is putting you at a disadvantage out of the opening. So I would recommend, even on YouTube, there are a lot of YouTubers that go over Grandmaster games, so you can try and find ones in your opening in sidelines that you struggle with and just see how the experts do it, because you can draw inspiration from that, even if you're not going to play as well as them. You can also get this information by looking at players' databases and Grandmaster databases to see, based on ratings, where players put their pieces and that kind of thing. So that can also be very helpful. The number 2 thing that I would teach my 900 ELO self is about how decisive tactics are. Pretty much every chess game is decided by tactics, including chess games at the Grandmaster level. And so it's not about who doesn't make mistakes, it's about who makes the last mistake for who's going to lose the game of chess. So if you can out-tactic your opponent, that is how you're going to win the majority of your games. You're not going to be winning them by having some master Karpovian strategy where you suffocate your opponent with a closed position. It's not. I'm sorry. That's probably not how it's going to go. You are probably going to fork their king and queen with a knight, and that's fine. That's also a very good and respectable way to win. We've all won like that. But that is how most of your games are going to go, right? With tactics. And so therefore, you need to be practicing your tactics, practicing doing puzzles. And I think if you're not in a regular kind of routine with doing that, what I would say is you can start by trying to solve 5 correct puzzles per day. What I mean by that is not solving 5 puzzles, getting them wrong and trying again, is solving 5 without any mistakes. That might mean that you have to solve 15 before you get 5 perfect puzzles. It depends on how impatient you are, okay? It depends on how difficult the puzzles are. And then once you've got into this habit of doing 5 correct puzzles a day, see if you can do 10 correct puzzles a day. Because first of all, you will realize that you don't want to waste your time doing 30 puzzles to get 10 puzzles right. And you will therefore spend a bit more time and effort on each puzzle to get it right the first time, because it's much quicker to do 10 puzzles correctly in a row than to spam 100 puzzles by guessing the first move, Put a little bit of time and effort and thought into it, and it will save you time in the long run, and it will improve your chess, because you just need to have better tactical vision than your opponent. You don't need to have the world's best tactics. You just have to be a little bit better than your opponent. The next thing I would absolutely roast my 900 ELO self about is basic endgames, because I see a lot of beginners fumbling basic king and pawn endgames. You can do these as drills on chess.com. You can go to chess.com/endgames or whatever it is, and you can click basic endgames, king and pawn, and you can look at the winning, drawing, and losing king and pawn endgames, and you can literally drill them into your brain so that you know when is a good time to trade down in an ending. Because sometimes I have seen beginners have a winning position and then trade down into a drawn or even losing position by trading down into a king and pawn endgame. Again, you don't need to have perfect endgames. You just need them to be better than your opponent. So it's fine if we're not all in the search for perfection here. I know if you play chess, you're probably some level of a perfectionist, me too, but that is actually not the goal here. The goal is just to be better than your opponent at every turn. So this will save you a lot of hassle if you can see your position and say, oh, if we just traded knights, I'm winning this game so easily. I'm promoting to a queen. It's so much easier. Even if you promote to the queen and the knights are still on the board, it's so much easier for those knights to not be there, right? So I really would recommend knowing when is a good time to trade down in these basic positions. Obviously, some endgames are much, much more complicated than others. I personally have misplayed thousands of endgames. Of course, we all have. But you will be much better equipped to get those wins in the bag after you've played a great game. The worst thing is, feeling like you don't know how to win it, right? Who in chess said that the hardest thing to do is to win a winning game? Hear it all the time. Number 4 is kind of similar. It's about checkmating, specifically under pressure, because I see many players, even up to around 1400, failing to deliver rook and king checkmate cleanly, or queen and king checkmate. I mean, okay, if you have like 1 second, you can stalemate with a king and queen. Unfortunately, there are ways around it. Like if you treat the king and queen checkmate the same as the rook and king checkmate, you won't stalemate, basically. So if you learn the perfect technique, again, I would recommend going to chess.com drills, because this can become muscle memory to the point where you don't even have to think about these checkmates. You shouldn't have to think about these checkmates because they are all pattern based. And once your brain recognizes these patterns, you will be able to repeat them without thinking about it. You will know exactly which squares the pieces should be on, and it will be easy breezy. It will be a piece of cake, and you will go into these endgames so confidently, without panicking, without stressing, without being like, oh my gosh, what about stalemate? So honestly, you're doing yourself a huge disservice if you cannot do rook and king checkmate easy peasy with your eyes closed, because all it takes is learning the pattern. That's what the pattern is. Very simple. And that leads us into my tip number 5, which is the most complicated of them all, because it's all well and good to say, oh, you just need to know how to checkmate, but you actually have to get that winning position in the first place. And I know that getting the winning position in the first place can sometimes be the hardest part, because what if your opponent isn't making mistakes? What if your opponent seems to be playing the game of their life and you're out here and you only need 5 more rating points to reach 1000 and your opponent is literally playing their immortal? Oh my God, so annoying. So tip number 5 is figuring out what your opponent wants. I think when I was a beginner, I very rarely thought about what it was that my opponent was trying to achieve, other than checkmate. Obviously, that is the aim of the game. And so when I say finding out what your opponent wants, I know we're not talking about checkmate. We're finding out about what your opponent's plans could be, where they might put their pieces next, which pawn breaks they might try to make, which tactics they could set up. You know, do you have weaknesses where your king and your queen are on the same diagonal, or pieces can be pinned, or sacrifices can be made? And so being able to anticipate your opponent's moves is pretty much half the struggle. The other half being trying to figure out what to play for your own moves. Also very difficult. My point is that if you can figure out what your opponent wants, sometimes you're able to prevent it, and in other times you're able to slow it down to further your own plan. At the end of the day, outside of checkmate, the only other goal of chess is to be as annoying as possible. And what is more annoying than having your plan thwarted by the enemy? This is the point where I want to remind you that your opponents are going to be tricky. They're going to set traps. Even if they're not particularly high ELO, they will still set up checkmating threats and traps and try to win your queen. And underestimating your opponent, no matter what their rating is the biggest disservice that you can do to yourself. I think I've said like 5 different things in this video could be the biggest disservice you could do, but honestly, underestimating your opponent is number 1, I think. So let me give you an example. Poison pawns, pieces that seem free. Yes, there is a very good chance that your opponent has just blundered a piece for nothing or blundered a queen for nothing. But if your opponent makes a move that seems so strange, don't just capture like a free pawn. Ask why your opponent has made that move. Have they set up something tricky? Why did they just jump their queen over to your king side and leave a pawn hanging? You know, maybe they have something more nefarious up their sleeve. You never know. And when it comes to chess strategy, I know that beginners can have a really hard time making a plan, but I think part of making a plan is trying to figure out what your opponent is trying to achieve, and this will keep you one step ahead in strategy. Thank you so much for listening. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Leave a comment down below if something in this video resonated with you, and I will see you next time. Bye, guys.